The wait is finally over. If you've been fiending for a new Kurosun cloth pad, and you're not the biggest fan of really slow control pads, and also not a speed pad abuser, this could very well be up your alley. But before we go into a full detailed review, I do need to mention that this pad was indeed sent out to me by Kurosun themselves. Huge shout out to Takusi, square pads win. And I also would truly appreciate if you could subscribe and hit the notification bell right next to it if you're at all interested in these types of reviews. Else I will hurt this guy. Before we get into the actual pad itself, I do want to start with the unboxing experience, since this is something rather special compared to most other cloth pads out there. You open it here from the back where the huge Kurosun logo is. It has a perfect tier that doesn't split up like crazy. You then open it like an envelope, where you are greeted with this inner cardboard box. Here you can see the key art design on the front, and on the rear you have a seal, where you then yet again open it like an envelope, and up here you're also greeted with this thing, which just yet again shows how much Kurosun cares about the unboxing experience, and simply makes you realize that there's been a bit more thought put into this, especially because you don't only get instructions for the actual pad, but also a huge thank you card, and this inner envelope is absolutely reusable, which you can't really say for most packagings out there, because they're a tear that you simply have to stick together with some tape again if you actually want to seal them. In terms of dimensions, this pad is 490 by 420, as almost any other standard cloth pad in our scene. The mouse pad itself is pretty darn thin. It comes in at around 3.25 millimeters, and despite the pad being so thin, the stitching is absolutely level to surface, and you will never feel the stitching whilst playing in-game. At least I didn't personally. When it comes to the base itself, this is a pretty new alpha cell SKU. The bottom of the pad is very grippy but not super sticky to the point where it just collects all the dust off your desk. It doesn't move when playing in-game whatsoever, and the base on the pad is very firm. It doesn't feel firm to the point where it feels like a hard pad, like on a freefall pad for example, because there is some slight squish that you can press into, but really this is a very consistent experience where you don't really feel that you're digging into your pad in-game whatsoever. And since I know that mainly Valorant players are gonna watch this video because their favorite pros have used this pad on stage, I will also check out how it actually copes with sleeves. With the focus sleeve, there is definitely some friction there, but I don't feel that it is very distracting. I think that it is usable. If you are someone that really enjoys the zero surface and wants to use a sleeve, the Samurai could actually be something for you, because the sleeves drag like crazy on a zero. At least that is how it goes for most of the sleeves out there on the market, and it is much more usable here on the Samurai. Whereas my entire arm just completely sticks to the zero instantly as soon as I try to use a sleeve on it. With the wall hack sleeve, it also feels okay. I feel like I have slightly more drag on it, but really yet again it is definitely much more usable than on a zero. In terms of the design, this is the only option that you have, and if you're asking me, it is a sick design, especially because it has that complementary signature white stitching. And now, getting into the more juicy stuff, the surface itself. This is actually a woven pad and not a knitted pad. So that means that compared to your traditional pads, this is kind of a three-dimensional weave. You can instantly see that when looking at the texture itself. Not only can this actually help with the overall longevity of the cloth itself, but also does it simply provide something much more unique than your traditional knitted mouse pads. It is not some sort of huge benefit that makes you absolutely want this pad just because it's better than anything else. It is just a very cool spec. When you first get this pad, it definitely does have a break-in period. I can't really tell you how long it did take me to get a uniform experience on this pad, but at first, the X and Y difference was pretty severe. However, after 2 to 3 days of gaming and also a whole week's of constant usage, just because I couldn't really get off this thing, it suddenly just became very uniform, and I barely feel a difference between the X and Y axis now. I do still think that there is a slight difference in X and Y speed. My X axis feels faster than my Y axis. That does also align with the weave being in a horizontal direction here on the pad. In theory, this should actually be uniform in the X and Y axis, but it still just really isn't fully that for me. This is nothing that has distracted me in any type of real game, but in certain Kovac scenarios, I did feel that difference. When going over it with dot skates, it feels much more uniform to me personally, because there's not that much skate material to actually pick up friction upon, but a small difference in X and Y speed is definitely still there. This pad is actually being called a balanced pad, and I would say that it is pretty balanced. You can definitely not call this a real control pad, even though that other people that I've talked to compare this the most to the Zero. Now, of course, the Zero isn't a real control pad either. It is definitely on the upper end of the control spectrum for sure, but in the overall speed, these are very similar. The Zero is noticeably more textured than the Samurai over here. The Samurai has almost no texture. You do feel that weave upon your fingers, but that is really about it. Whilst in the Zero, you can definitely feel those vertical streaks while doing horizontal swipes. I would say that compared to something like the Zero here in Soft, this pad feels ever so slightly faster, but overall, it is very, very similar. Same thing, of course, also goes for the Lethal Gaming Gear Saturn, which is in the same category here, with the Saturn being much more similar in terms of the overall smoothness. And I think that this pad sits in between the normal new Saturn and also the Saturn Pro. I know that a lot of people will call these types of pads control pads, but really they're just not that controlled. They are almost balanced pads, especially by these days standard, because the new benchmark that we're going to use from the future on is going to be the Type 99, which is much more controlled than these pads. And then we have speed pads out there like the Infinity Mousepad V2, which is a billion times faster than this. And honestly, that's already about it. It is a mouse pad. There's not that much more to say. It is simply a bit more unique than most of your black squares out there, especially due to that custom weave that they use. I think that it is a very safe option for most people out there, no matter what game you play. I really do think that this is a great option for those people crutching on really slow control pads, getting into something that is slightly more balanced and gives you a bit more raw aim, but for me personally, this is still a bit slow. In games like Fortnite, this is fine because I'm not fighting 24/7, but in other games like XDefiant that are insanely tracking heavy, I do feel that this pad is kind of holding me back. But that is simply my personal preference because I really like speed pads for the time being. So I will be much looking forward to the new Ninja V2 if that happens to actually come out. The release date on this pad is the 19th of June, so that is in 2 weeks from the day that I'm recording this thing. And if I remember correctly, this pad will retail for around $50. Considering the unboxing experience and also the overall quality of this pad, it is absolutely justified. And if you're really looking forward to getting this pad, definitely make sure to be there when it actually launches. Because the FOMO and hype around Kurosun pads is so freaking huge. It would not surprise me if this thing sells out within a few seconds. Also, I'm not saying any of these things because I'm affiliated with them or anything like that. I do not have an affiliate code. I'm not partnered with them. I'm simply just reviewing this thing. Other than that, that's about it for this video. Make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell right next to it if you're at all interested in these types of reviews. I'll see you guys very soon. Peace out.